Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walker. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. Getting close to the winter solstice. I believe that's tomorrow. I actually looked it up to find out whether it was the 20th or the 21st. I don't keep up on those pagan holidays like I used to. Well, I do, actually. I keep up with them exactly like I used to. I never did. And even my calendar is no help with this one, I don't think. I don't know. I haven't looked that far ahead. I'm taking it day by day at this point. Tomorrow's the winter solstice, and I think they said something in the 11 a.m. Eastern time hour is the exact moment, I guess, of solstice. The moment at which the sun is directly above the, what are we talking about? The Tropic of Capricorn, I guess, for the winter solstice. Won't be making it to Stonehenge this year or any other year, I'm pretty sure, nor will I be outside dancing around in circles. Not because I don't want to be, but because I'll be busy bringing you the show tomorrow, or wrapping up the post-production anyway, at the exact moment of solstice. But someone can get out there and tip their pagan hat for me, and say a little, well, you won't be able to, I guess if you're down south, say a little hello to the sun for me. We'll wait for it to come back to the other tropic, the one we prefer, Cancer, I suppose. And, well, you know, it was lots of interesting facts I was reading. Tomorrow's I guess it's the shortest day of the year, but it's, interestingly enough, not the latest sunrise or earliest sunset. But okay, well, I'm not certain exactly how that works, but you astrophysicists can tell me about that one. We'll focus on temporal issues like the almost passage of the Republican tax bill. I think we still have to wait for one more vote in the House because they screwed everything up. We assume that Joan McCarter's voice is better this week. I hope so, anyway, for her own sake and for yours, because it would be great to have her come in and explain what's going on and exactly what stage we're in. She was writing up yesterday afternoon as I was idling my time away in the eye doctor's office for my older son's glasses, to be screwed up, of course. So we'll be back there on Thursday to get them fixed. This is what we were supposed to be picking up, the new glasses, but everything got screwed up because it's the holidays, everybody. We're all getting distracted. Anyway, so that's, I guess, the big news of the day from Capitol Hill, the federal capital. From the state capital of Virginia, there was big news, and I'm sure you've all seen it by now. This is like literally I don't know, I guess if you're a Republican, the nightmare scenario. If you're a Democrat, it's cause for celebration. It's not outright control of the Virginia House, or that is to say, the Virginia House of Delegates, the state legislature's lower house, but we all recall that we were waiting on recounts to be finished in, I think, up to 4 districts. And I guess we've gotten down to the last one, and it's like something out of a made-for-TV movie or something. They counted and counted and counted, and it looks like the Democratic candidate, a woman by the name of Shelley Simons, I don't know if she says Simmons or Simons, there's only one M in it, in one of the Northern Virginia districts. Looks like it's maybe down in I don't know, Prince William County. What's down there? I'm taking a look, see whether we can get a description of the actual location of the county. But the big news here is that she has unseated a Republican delegate by literally one vote. And that one vote, of course, puts her over the top. She wins the seat. And I guess they have yet to actually certify this 100%, but everybody is pretty much in agreement that that's the way the count goes. And even the Republican conference or caucus, I don't know what they call it in the Virginia House of Delegates, has conceded that they will lose this seat. So it's all over but for the ministerial approval of the count, which was checked and rechecked. So this one vote gives the Democratic challenger the seat. That seat makes the Virginia House of Delegates 50-50 split between Republicans and Democrats. I don't actually know offhand what the procedure is for tie breaking in the House. I mean, there was always lots of chatter about it, and it was easy to understand because it follows the model of the Senate, that Senate ties are broken by, in the federal legislature by the vice president serving as president of the Senate, in the state legislature by the lieutenant governor sitting as, I suppose, president of the Senate or presiding officer of some kind. Anyway, I'm woefully educated, I guess, about the Virginia state system of government. I didn't grow up here, although I don't know if I know that much more about the New Jersey system of government. We all just assume it's more or less in parallel to the federal system, which I know a great deal more about, but it's not always the case. Anyway, that's some big news. I don't know how you come away from that news with anything other than the message that, yes, every vote counts. Yes, you have a responsibility to go out there and cast that ballot, even if it's raining. I don't actually know anybody who skips voting because of rain, but if you were ever inclined to do so, I would implore you to think twice about it and do so well before the voting deadline so that you can get out there and cast that ballot. Who knows how the vote might have gone had everyone who really wanted to cast a ballot been able to cast one, let alone everyone who was actually qualified being allowed to cast a ballot. I am for, of course, an expansion of the franchise aside from just allowing everybody who's qualified under the current law to cast a ballot. I don't know if at least philosophically speaking, I can't really necessarily say I'm opposed to allowing people who are living here and living under the laws and intend to remain here living under the laws set by the legislature. Why can't they cast a ballot? Because they were born in another country and left it 5, 10, 15 years ago, and now have agreed to live under our laws in a collective enterprise? I'm not really certain why we disallow that. I guess out of an abundance of caution, probably to avoid things like people say just walking into the country from Russia and electing elected officials that would be more, let's say, inclined toward benefiting Russia itself or Russian citizens with American policy than helping Americans. That would be a terrible thing, of course, and yet it may be where we ended up. So there's plenty more on that front, of course, plenty more on the tax bill and where they stand. We'll let Joan update us on that. Right now we've got Greg Dworkin. You heard the beautiful chimes and music letting us know that he was calling in from Connecticut, which is not, I think, decided its state legislature by one vote. But we'll allow him on the show today anyway. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. That is kind of pretty music, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean,
even though the whole rest of the new Skype upgrade is kind of awkward, but the music is very pretty.
Pretty soon we'll get used to it. The great thing about every update is it sucks immediately, and then when they fix it later or do something else, you say, "What happened to my old Skype, the one I hated?"
Right. So, as far as I can tell,
yes,
looking at the Google here,
tag Google,
Virginia doesn't have any procedures.
Aha. See, that's why I must not know that.
Right. But
and there's only 100 in the House. That's awkward.
Yeah. So I think they're going to make it up as they go along.
Yes.
But here's an interesting piece. Sometimes for these legislative things, I turn to the National Conference of State Legislatures site.
That sounds nice.
Kind of a procedural site there. I'll throw that in at the end so you can find it. In case of a tie.
Yes.
Legislative deadlock tied chambers. Most often you find legislative chamber controlled by one political party in any of the 60 chambers with an even number of seats. However, an equal split may occur. And tied chambers are more and more frequent. Every even year election from 84 to 2010 produced at least one deadlocked chamber.
Okay.
So the last one was in 2016 in Connecticut, which was 1818. 2011 was Virginia Senate 2020.
Yeah. Senate's obviously the most
Yeah, these are the Senates. Oregon House, though, 30-30 in 2010. And the Montana House, 50-50 in 2004.
Yeah, those are Senate-sized houses.
Yeah. Sometimes what you have is what's called a negotiated agreement. So the lieutenant governor could be the deciding vote in the Senate, but in the House, what you do is you negotiate a share power agreement.
Yes, that's
And
what
for
they're
example, in Washington, in the House, in Indiana, these are power sharing agreements that added the prefix co to leadership and committee chair titles. The dual leaders and committee chairs alternate the times during which they preside. Indiana, Nevada, and Washington alternated daily. Michigan switched every month, and New Jersey changed every 2 months.
Huh.
So that's one way to do it. I
Yeah.
thought this was fascinating, and for a process guy, I thought you might find this interesting, too.
I do. We're going to have to deal with this at some point. I know they are negotiating such an agreement here in Virginia. If you want to get down to the brass tacks of it, Ben Tribbett is a good guy to follow on that.
Yes, known as not
Twitter.
Larry Sabato. He's great, and he called this, by the way,
Yes.
on Election Day and said, nope, this is going to come to a recount. We're going to win.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, good
It's
job.
only
Yeah,
10 votes, and
he
I'm
tends
telling
to
you,
get down in
and
those
besides, that's not even
weeds.
including the areas where they were wrongly sent to the wrong district
Yes.
for their vote. That's another problem altogether. I'll skip that for the moment and let you sum that up because it's too complicated for me. But anyway, you have this co-agreement in a lot of places where you just change, We're going to pass it. We're going to pass this tomorrow. Well, we're going to unpass it the next day. Well, we're going to pass it again the next day. So you have this co-agreement with sharing power. Then another way to do it is called a divided power contract. And this was the Minnesota House in 78, North Dakota House in 76, among others. These agreements divide the power between the parties. Under this form of power sharing, one party selects the presiding officer, the other, the chairs of the most powerful committees. And so, okay, we get this one, you get that one, and then so they kind of divvy it up by agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, and if the co-chairs of any standing committee can't agree on how to conduct committee business, a special rule kicks in. It specifies that one party's chair presided the first year and the other party's the second. So just in case you can't agree, then okay, you get it for a year, then we get it for a year. And then the third way, which is fascinating, is called the negotiated resignation.
I hate the third way. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you'll hate this third way, too. Used by Florida Senate and Maine Senate. In Florida, the state constitution reads, each house shall biennially choose its officers, including a permanent presiding officer selected from membership. So when the Senate faced a partisan stalemate, lawyers and rules experts determined the Constitution's language precluded the use of co-presidents. Members agreed that each party would hold the presidency for a year, but to be constitutional, only one could be elected. So the body elected a Republican president who tendered an unconditional, irrevocable resignation to take effect 11 months later, and also elected a Democratic president who would take over when the time came. The Maine Senate used a variation of this type of power sharing, too. So it's by rule rather than by agreement.
I see.
You actually physically have to sign something that says, okay, I resign, in order to turn power over to the other party.
Interesting. And that has what happens at the tips, as it were, the extremes of the East Coast.
Yeah. So, depending upon what your state constitution says that you are allowed to do. And so this advisory group here, the National State Legislator site for committees to get together to talk about how legislators should be run. That's their formal name.
It's a very long URL.
With so many even-numbered legislative chambers, deadlocks are likely to continue. That is to say, if you have 100 members. See, if you had 101 members, it wouldn't be a problem. But with 100 members, it is. If it happens to your chamber, here's some advice from those who already have faced a political tie. 1, view the situation as a challenge, not a dilemma. Have the attitude that you're going to make it succeed. 2, use organizations such as us, the National Council of State Legislators, to find out what other states have faced deadlock and what they've done. And then open up lines of communication with those states. If possible, get a mentor in one of them, someone who's willing to help you through the details. Begin negotiating as soon as possible. Put people who aren't intensely partisan or ideological in the leadership positions.
No.
Cooperation and productivity are more important than who gets the credit for each individual issue. Establish and maintain good communication, key to avoiding problems. In other words, if the Republican House followed these things, we'd be so much better off, but that's not how they do it. Don't forget a mechanism or an escape valve to keep the process moving. You might need it in case important or critical legislation gets bogged down As for that, okay, it's every other day, or we already agreed that if this happens, we win this time and you win next time, or something.
Yes, or fake once a year you get to do it by 50 votes or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, that's really interesting.
But they've anticipated that this might happen, and
yes.
Again, as far as I know, it's important because I don't think Virginia actually has a formal mechanism set out as to this is what we are going to do.
It's pretty amazing that they don't. I mean, as I said, it's probably more common that Senates get tied just because they tend to have smaller. Well, they almost always do have smaller memberships as the upper house in any place that's got a bicameral legislature and uses a Senate model. But some of these houses are pretty small and are Senate-sized or less, and so, by comparison with the U.S. Senate, say. And so it's relatively easy to come up with a tie. I imagine that I'd be curious to know whether there's any formal provision for New Hampshire, where it's, I would imagine, virtually impossible to really come out with a tie because there's 14,000 members of the House. But I don't know whether that's the case. But as I mentioned, Ben Tribbett, who does tweet as not Larry Sabato, followed this election very closely and also has been following the negotiation of the power sharing agreement and warning that the Democrats might find themselves falling into a trap on this and agreeing to a power sharing agreement that actually disadvantages them for some reason. I haven't been able to dig into it yet, but I'll follow along on that one and see if we can explain it sometime in the future.
It's when it surprises me, given what Republican legislatures tend to do and their whole philosophy about how to govern. Mm-hmm. What surprises me is they didn't, prior to the election or any election, pass a law signed by a Republican governor that says in the case of a tie, we do a co-speakership, but the rule is that in case of a tie, the Republicans win.
Yeah.
That's just the law, so there's nothing to argue about.
Right, and you got to respect the law and uphold it.
In the case of a tie in the lower chamber, the Speaker of the House will be elected by the Republicans and signed by the Republican, governor.
And we would point at that and say, that is terribly unfair. This is an outrage. And then what would happen? I'm not certain what
exactly.
I think afterwards
it's all about the
everybody's
state
supposed to say,
constitution. I don't know state constitutions. I'm not a lawyer anyway. I don't play one on the radio. But, what does your state constitution say you can and cannot do?
I don't know. We're changing our state constitution all the time. In Virginia, I'm constantly being asked to vote on constitutional amendments. And it's really very different world than the federal constitution, where we're almost never voting on any. I'm constantly being asked about whether or not there ought to be something about traffic
maybe
lights
that should be enshrined into the state constitution. In case of a tie,
changing everything.
Republicans win.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be very popular.
I don't know if it'd be popular, but it'd be popular with the Republicans, which, by the way, is how they govern. So, what's the difference?
Right. Well, we'll meet them halfway. 99% of the time, Republicans will control. The other 1%, Democrats will cede to the Republicans.
Right. Armando's pointing out that McAuliffe is governor, and I would point he's governor now. Virginia has had Republican governors.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, why didn't they do it back in the day when, McDonald was governor?
They were counting their money, I think. They probably should have done it while he was pulling down all those bribes. No one bribed them to do, it, I guess. So
yeah, I guess there's not enough money in it, But obviously, the real answer is nobody anticipated this happening. But, as you have said, and as Armando would agree, and I think everybody looking at this would say, every vote counts. This is, this is even worse or better than Florida, which was a 500, something, 21, whatever the number was for Bush in 2000.
Right.
Every vote counts, and you can't get closer than this.
Yeah. I don't know why they didn't anticipate it either. I mean, it's been about a decade since we have been taught to say Virginia's a purple state, it's a bellwether, it's 50-50, it could go either way, every vote counts, you got to get your voters out, et cetera, et cetera. Sooner or later,
now, you don't need it if you have the will to cooperate, as the NCSL was saying.
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying, in the real world, I don't know. I'm surprised they didn't do it.
I am surprised too, and I would imagine that we'll probably see something come out of this round, because they'll negotiate a power sharing agreement because there's nothing else they can do. I imagine in the end both sides will end up dissatisfied with it, and we'll see what they do about it.
Yeah, so it'll
be future
fun.
News. Okay.
It'll be fun. But, hey, when's the next set of elections?
For this?
Yeah, 2019.
Yeah.
So in a presidential election year, this doesn't happen?
No. Yes, it does. I don't know.
You guys have to be different. You have to do it on the off years.
Yeah, we're into the off-year thing. We like to have elections. Okay.
Very
do
cool.
it all the time.
So we'll follow that and let us know. And Ben Tribbett is a wonderful follow on Twitter if you're really interested in this. This morning's pundit roundup that I did was partly about the Senate passing the tax bill yesterday, and partly about the overall background, which we talked about a little bit on Monday, about the coming blue wave come this November.
Okay.
And you have to figure in the unpopularity of the bill that just passed. Because that's not going to help Republicans, and you really have to sit back and scratch your head and figure out, why are Republicans doing this? So currently, yesterday's poll only adds fuel to the fire here. Quinnipiac says that the generic ballot has the Democrats up by 15. Okay. The NBC News Wall Street Journal poll just a couple of days ago had them up 11, and that's a relatively moderate poll, as we talked about. It's generally right in the middle. PPP, which is a Democratic poll, but for this also leans about not at all, has the Democrats up by 11, and prior to that, Monmouth up by 15. So the past 4 polls have had the generic ballot up for the Democrats by double digits, and the average here is 11.6. And I hadn't seen it, but I read on Twitter that 538, which weights their polls a little differently, giving Quinnipiac and NBC News, for example, a little bit more sway than some of the other polls, has it closer to 12. And the best story, I think, written about how to interpret this was, of course, by Amy Walter, who I think is just a great overall analyst at the Cook Report. And this was back in November of 2017. When should we start paying attention to the congressional generic ballot test? And the short answer is now.
Okay, that is very short.
538's Harry Enton argues even a year out, the generic ballot question is actually quite predictive. He says the generic ballot, even this early, can be quite predictive. Once you control for which party's in the White House, the generic ballot about 18 months before midterm is strongly correlated with the eventual House result, the share of votes cast for the president's party versus the share of votes cast for the opposition party. In other words, there's a 78% chance that a Democratic 7-point lead in the generic ballot will translate into a 7-point margin of victory in the national House vote next fall. But another Democratic pollster, digging into the question of the predictive value, also found that the generic House vote is, quote, directly tied, end quote, to the incumbent president's approval rate, which tends not to settle in for the midterm until about Labor Day of the election year. And this pollster adds, so you have to wait. However, that assumes it's a normal president. If you think Trump is going to be more popular a year from now, the current margin is misleading. If you think it's likely to be the same or lower, then the generic today could well be the same or even better a year from now.
Yeah. Well,
right? So Republicans can consolidate a bit around the congressional candidates, but that still puts them in the low 40s, which would be really bad. If Trump approval stays mired where it is, a generic in the range it is today is very possible. So that's how you interpret it. In other words, it has not a 1-to-1, but a 3/4 correlation with what happens next year. It's fairly accurate now. It'll get more accurate as time goes on. We all know that with polls. But at the same time, if you step back and look at the overall picture, it really has very little to do with Trump's going to go up 3 points, Trump's going to go down 3 points. And of all people, somebody who actually picked up on this, because he doesn't always get it right, but in this time I think he did, Josh Kraushaar over at National Journal, with a free, don't worry about the paywall article, at least for the next couple of weeks, writes, the new reality. Americans are voting their values, not their pocketbooks. And that's alarming news for Republicans looking to hold their increasingly tenuous congressional majorities. It's also a danger signal for Trump if he's thinking about running for re-election in 2020. Trump's conduct in office is the defining issue in the country, one so central to next year's midterms The Democratic candidates don't need to mention the president's name to rile up their supporters. The big battles that have driven activists in the Trump era, travel ban, outrage over Betsy DeVos and education secretary policy, the fight to preserve legal status for children of undocumented immigrants, are rooted in the nation's cultural divisions. But it's more likely, he writes, that Trump has permanently squandered any goodwill with his racial demagoguery, ill-informed tweets, acidic attacks against his critics, all taking place alongside Robert Mueller's exhaustive investigation examining why Trump world has acted so solicitously toward Russia. They're salicious. They're not salicious. Well, yeah, they are. It's why his approval, it's delicious. It's why his approval rating is stuck in the dumps, despite an awfully productive first year in office. Productive in terms of he passed the tax legislation, and he's done a lot of executive orders, and he's got judges.
Okay.
So why his political fortunes, along with his adopted party, aren't likely to change much no matter how good things get for Americans. And so one of the things I think that's highlighted here is the disconnect between how the economy is doing, thanks Obama, and Trump's own political fortunes. Trump is not getting the credit for what Obama set up, and that's just fine with me, of course. But even as people look at the economy as getting better, Trump isn't changing.
Well, he's not likely.
Let me put it more simply, because this is reflected in the polls.
All right.
When you look at strongly approve or strongly disapprove, okay?
Yes.
Half the country loathes Trump. A quarter of them love him, and the other quarter is in play.
Right. I'm fine with that. Well, that's what we'll be waiting on, I suppose. And what you were saying is the generic ballot is highly predictive, unless you think that one quarter that's indifferent will suddenly love him. All right.
Or the people who loathe him will change their mind, and that ain't happening.
All right, we'll be right back after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We last left off, I think we went straight into the break discussing the importance of the generic ballot question one more time, where I had mentioned that the generic ballot, of course, thanks to Greg's explanation, clearly important unless you're one of those people that think that either the 1/4 of the country that is indifferent to him will suddenly grow to love him, or one other possibility was looming out there. That part I think we may have missed in the break. Greg?
Well, that was the idea that those who loathe, who despise, who detest, who with every fiber of their being want Trump out of the White House are suddenly going to change their mind and say, oh, okay, changed my mind. I mean, it's like we're all Bob Corker. Nah, it's not going to happen.
Well, he could lower our taxes.
Somebody asked Corker, how come you were so strong about not one more penny in the deficit? You're never going to vote for it. And then you went ahead and voted for it. And Corker shrugged and said, well, I felt that way during the interview.
It's a matter of what time you catch me. I was suffering from sort of low blood sugar at the time.
Right. And so I think, one of the other subtexts here, of course, as Jackie Calms was interviewing Trump ally, as he's called, Chris Collins. Okay. I just lost that where it was. But basically, he's one of these people who said, gee, I have no idea how that carried interest thing got into that tax bill.
There's a lot of the more interesting provisions. We're having difficulty finding out how they got in. Of course, there was no transparency to the process, so it actually works to say, I don't know how it got in there. Eventually, we may find out it was you.
Well, a lot of it is Orrin Hatch writing it in. But,
yes.
So the thing is that David Sirota, who actually did a nice piece on this, found 13 Republicans specifically who are going to benefit greatly by the bill. So they're writing stuff that's going to help themselves. My point is that conservatives really still can't wrap their brains around the idea that the electorate doesn't really want what they're selling.
Yeah. Well, they would
really
like
don't.
it very much.
I mean, they don't want this tax bill. They don't want the Affordable Care Act repealed. They don't want Trump's foreign policy. They don't want Trump's policy toward immigrants. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's a section of the country that does. We don't have unanimity on everything, but he doesn't have majority support for any of this stuff. And then conservatives keep saying, but if we're going to stick with him because we're going to get our cherished goals. We're mildly surprised that he's actually doing the things we want to do. It's going to turn out these are really unpopular, and that's one of the things that's fueling that large generic ballot deficit there for the Republicans. So I don't see how this bill is going to help. Now, traditional thinking is, well, the bill will get more popular over time, but actually as stuff about it gets exposed, I'm not so sure that that's the case. McConnell said last night, now we just have to go sell this baby to the American public. That's our job, and if we can't do it, we may as well go home and do something else. And I totally agree with him.
Well, they're leading.
It's going to happen in November.
At last, they're out in front and leading the American people, doing what they think is right and convincing us later. I suppose we should be glad about that rather than having them be led around by the nose, by the polls all the time, and leading from behind.
Right.
But I can only imagine that a lot of these guys are like, well, compared to the amount of money I'm going to save on taxes, this job, what it pays kind of sucks. So, I mean, I guess if I lose this job, I can make more money on passive income thanks to the new tax code. I don't know how long it lasts. Democrats, of course, would love dearly to reverse all of this nonsense if they take over the House and Senate. But, of course, Donald Trump, presumably, I mean, absent impeachment would, or dropping dead for that matter, would still be president. And if not him, then Mike Pence, and who knows how far down the line we have to go. But after a while, but it may just be that 3 years of enormous tax savings is well worth the sacrifice. I don't know.
Well,
you have to ask their accountants.
You have to also take into account the fact that the individual tax breaks disappear, and
true. Well,
the corporate ones don't. The other side of the coin
is
that the corporate profits are at record highs. They don't need this. This winds up fueling inflation, and it's going to have, of course, consequences that they don't anticipate as well. That's especially true when you don't really, look at the bill very carefully and you throw it together real fast.
Right.
So here's another Crash Hour tweet, which I thought was kind of funny. And this highlights one of the other problems here. He says, in the 2020 preview, the NBC Wall Street Journal tests Trump versus generic Democrat, and the generic Democrat at 52, Trump 36. Now, that gives you an idea about what Trump's base really is. And, of course, it's going to generate a whole lot of hot takes about, from Michael Moore and other non-thinking analysts like him about how Trump is on his way to re-election because you didn't pay attention to my pet project.
Oh.
And I think, a great piece that kind of highlights this is Bill Scher, who has some really insightful, he doesn't write that often for Politico, but when he does, it's often quite insightful. He wrote a piece back in October, I think, about how this was all a culture war for Trump, and that's the only thing he cares about. And then there was a whole series of ones subsequent to that, but I think he wrote the first one, and I think it was quite true. This one is, what will it take to beat Trump? The case for a generic Democrat.
Okay.
Democrats don't need inspiration or revolution to win 2020. They just need somebody bland and inoffensive, kind of like Doug Jones.
Okay.
Right? People are going to be unhappy with Ralph Northam. I mean, he's not immediately expanding Medicaid in Virginia, or at least he didn't say he was going to. Or Doug Jones, who said, I don't even remember what he said. It was maybe don't impeach Trump today or some other bland kind of statement.
Sort of drop the don't pursue him over his sexual harassment issues.
These are all for the moment, based on what's going on. And of course, they're all trying to represent their own states. Democrats, still reeling from last year's wipeout, have been embroiled in a debate over how to fix what went wrong in 2016. Should they tack left or center? Woo white working class voters with an ambitious economic agenda, double down on the base by blitzing Trump on bigotry, prioritize healthcare, inequality, oligarchy, democracy. The Doug Jones upset in deep red Alabama may have just rendered these debates irrelevant. I'll have a follow-up to that idea as to who the Democrats should pursue as well. The Senate's newest member did not embrace single-payer health care, free college, or a $15 minimum wage. He didn't swerve right on abortion and guns. In fact, he didn't have any signature policy proposals at all. He actually did. It was redo CHIP.
Right, which is not a bad one.
It's not a bad one. And also improve Alabama schools and education in terms of where they rank nationally, which I think was 49th. And that whole comment reminds me of the Virginia House of Delegates winner, who happens to be a trans woman.
Yes, Danica Rubin.
Everybody was talking about that nationally, and locally it was all about traffic and the sort of stuff that people care about locally. So Doug Jones is talking about things that Alabamians care about, and the national people are saying, look, he didn't have any policy. Because it wasn't abortion, annoying. Guns, minimum wage, or single-payer health care, all this stuff we recognize. And therefore, it really didn't have any policy at all, which is completely untrue, but just shows you how political reporters see everything through the prism that they've already been trained to look at things. Ralph Northam may have been the right candidate for Virginia because he represented enough Virginians that he won. Okay, and he doesn't have to be Keith Ellison, and he doesn't have to be Nancy Pelosi in order to win where he is. Same with Doug Jones. That doesn't mean that we have to go back and, bring back the Blue Dogs and have that fight all over again. But you have to have a candidate that fits where you're running. And Jones
or
did,
have a child molester on the other side.
Yeah. What Jones did was take off the shelf the most pallid Democratic talking points: quality, affordable health care, college must be affordable, I believe in science, discrimination can't be tolerated, and campaign with a pleasant, inoffensive demeanor. He was boring, he was safe, he was Mr. Generic Democrat, and it worked. That should make Democrats think twice about what they should be looking for in a 2020 presidential nominee. He's basically arguing against a firebrand.
Yes, well, he is doing that. It seems like he's ignoring a very large factor in that election, but okay. The other guy was a child molester.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, if you're going to win in Alabama, you have to have that in addition in order to win.
Yes. Although I'm saying I'm not certain that we have like a test
run Nancy
case.
Pelosi in Alabama against Roy Moore, and Moore wins.
Maybe. But is Nancy Pelosi a firebrand?
Well, she's San Francisco values, San Francisco values versus Roy Moore values, or Alabama values from 40 years ago, I guess, is his campaign.
I'm not certain that there's a great deal of difference.
I'm not certain that that what happens is that Moore loses. It took a Doug Jones to beat Moore, unfortunately, but at the same time, there were enough good Alabamians who voted for Doug Jones, including activating, very importantly, grassroots black vote with hard work, get out the vote door to door, involving sinking money in there and not taking them for granted. And those are all hugely important. You also got a lot of Republican suburban women to stay home or just not vote. So the point isn't that Doug Jones is the right candidate for everywhere. He's not. And nationally, he might not be the right candidate. But for Alabama, he was perfect, just like, by definition, based on the election, Ralph Northam was fine for Virginia. Yeah,
well, he was certainly he was okay. And you look after the fact and say that the guy won, and it's how much more can you say? He was perfect for the situation. He did win, and it's clearly, not clearly not the case, but it's very likely not the case that, say, Nancy Pelosi wins in Alabama. I'm not certain how much it tells us about the necessity for bland candidates, given how extreme the situation was down there. But okay, that is what won.
It doesn't
say
what
gets
you
nominated.
have to have
That's
bland
true.
candidates. It says bland candidates can be fine.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's all right. Sure, they can win. One did.
They can
I
win.
Gotcha.
Had Hillary Clinton, there's a lot of people that don't like Tim Kaine, who's also Mr. Bland, right?
He is.
Had Hillary Clinton won the election by 80,000 votes in different places, Tim Kaine would have been the perfect Democratic vice president for her to have.
Yes.
And she loses, so obviously he was awful, and
right.
You had somebody else that got her 80,000 more votes.
Right.
I mean, that's what happens with elections. It's totally,
okay.
how good or how bad you are is
certainly
totally determined by the results, not objective scorecarding by pundits.
I think I'm forced to accept the proposition that the people who win won.
Yeah.
I
agree
must agree with that.
The idea that you have to have that, this is what you have to run on.
Okay.
This is the only way to do it. You got to do it this. I've always had issues with that.
Okay, I'm with you there.
And so you step back and look at the bigger picture. Are we supposed to rev up our own base, or are we supposed to try to, at the margins, pull off some Republicans to vote with us? And the answer is yes.
Right. Whatever
Zach
works.
McRae, who's also the political pollster from Alabama, got a piece from him from Medium, also looking at Alabama and looking at it the similar way. And I'll give you the nut graph there. Base solidification, a Democratic turnout surge, and sufficient success with independent white suburban voters were all absolutely necessary for the Jones campaign to thread the needle to win a Senate race in a state that Donald Trump carried with 62%. While some pundits argue that Democrats must focus disproportionately on base motivation, or conversely should largely target voters who've moved toward Republicans over the past couple of cycles, the lesson that Senator-elect Doug Jones provides is clear. You got to do it everything. Democrats should and must employ an all of the above strategy to win tough states and districts in 2018 and beyond. Now, if you want to get the House back, some of these are going to be marginal districts or purple districts or swing districts or whatever you want to call it. And swing districts are not the same as marginal districts, but you got to pick up some extra votes in places you didn't expect to in order to flip the House. And you're going to have to do it in various ways. And doing all of that, trying to recruit some Republicans to vote for you or stay home at the same time, making sure that your base is energized, and by all means, sink a ton of money and don't take for granted the black vote, the people of color vote, Latino vote. Work for those things. Do it all. You do that, you can win.
Yeah. So do all things. Everybody.
Do all things.
Go do them.
Be all things to all people.
Right. Pretty much.
That's promise that you're going to lower taxes and raise services, because everybody loves that.
I guess so. It seems to have worked for president.
Right.
So
again, stepping back and look at the bigger picture, the Democrats are doing actually pretty well. And so people fixated on 2016 and who haven't ever moved beyond it are going to look at you and say, yeah, well, you got to do this or this or that, because what you're saying really didn't work in 2016. It's 2017 and we're talking about 2018. And those things generally do work, and they will work in 2018. And the fact that 2016 was a black swan, was a one-off, was a bizarre election result fueled a lot by misogyny and Comey and the Russians, should not make you change everything you know about political gravity and how campaigns work. And the normal, usual way things work are still going to wind up working like that in 2017 and 2018. How do we know? Virginia and Alabama results. Generic Democratic ballot for 2018. And the idea that everything has changed and you have to do it Trump's way or this or that or whatever is garbage.
Like Trump, I suppose. Certainly,
Trump thinks. You want to buy that? That's fine.
I mean, it's impossible to do anything Trump's way. I don't think anybody has got it in them.
Well, you have to adjust, and you got to be just as extreme, and you have to be like the Republicans, and you have to do it so that you have to exclude them completely and only do it for your bit. It's not how you win. It's also not how you govern.
Well, yeah, we'll certainly see about that. Everyone will.
It's how they govern, but their way is actually turning off a lot of people and getting them really ticked off, and that's how come we see this generic ballot.
Yeah, although I'm not certain that
short-term gain, long-term pain for them.
So
I don't think that we should do it that way.
I would imagine that there are a number of things that the Democrats, if they were returned to power, should be less shy about doing, but that
That's
doesn't
true.
necessarily mean that...
Don't assume, that it's going to be, all lights and flowers and unicorns and ponies, and that once we're back in power, they'll see the error of their ways and then want to cooperate.
Oh, that definitely won't happen.
That won't happen. You got to be suspicious of everything they do. And you got, it's trust but verify.
Yeah, I guess so. The difficulty is in how that manifests itself and how Democrats...
Just don't be a scarred, post-traumatic, warped person because of what happened in 2016.
Okay, that seems like fair advice.
Step back and just take a big, deep breath and look at the way of the world. People are still people, and the usual rules still apply. That's my basic overall message here.
Well, we still have a year to find out whether that's the case, or and possibly will be incinerated by
the whole
nuclear
idea
war.
that that's the ceiling. I think actually Trump. It's more likely that Trump has a ceiling and we don't know the floor. That's more likely than the other way. That this is Trump's floor and we don't know his ceiling. I don't think that's the case. I don't. That 50% loathing is not going to change.
That's tough to change, loathing.
Yeah, it really is. Great column by Sally Q. Yates in USA Today. This is all from the Pundit Roundup. Who are we as a country? Time to decide. Not only is there such a thing as objective truth, failing to tell the truth matters. We can't control whether our public servants lie to us. We're not living in ordinary times, and it's not enough for us to admire our nation's core values from afar. Stand up, speak out, get involved. So that's what we do. Now, the latest Quinnipiac poll shows worrisome numbers for Trump and the GOP with millennials. Trump approval's at 25%, 58% strongly disapprove. GOP net unfave is minus 38, and the Dem is plus 11. And 60% say Democratic Party should control the House of Representatives. That's from the Q poll from yesterday. And again, you look at this and say, well, millennials. Well, stop dumping on millennials. First of all, they're not only going to be the largest voting group, but second of all, both in Alabama and Virginia, they showed up, they voted, and I think that's going to wind up happening in 2018 as well.
There's something very retro about voting, and I think they dig that.
Yeah, maybe, whatever.
It could be. It's what we really need to do. I think maybe the solution is we need to get rid of the laws that prevent you from Instagramming your ballot. And that would probably have a great effect on bringing them back. Because right now, a lot of states, you photograph your ballot, you're in trouble. And that seems to be a motivating factor. Either that or put maybe avocados on the ballot.
By the way, why is the...
Not to vote for, to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On toast. Why is the House...
Maybe they'd vote for avocados.
Revoting again today?
They are very, very dumb. And Joan will explain it, I believe, if she's got
She will, but I'm going to set her up for it.
You want to know.
Because part of the problem, of course, is that there was actually something wrong with the name of the bill itself.
Yes. First of all, they should have taken Trump's advice and stayed with the Cut Act. I don't know why they ran away from that. But they did.
And that led to some speculation. Liam Donovan, conservative, but one of the finer conservatives that I follow, reasonable guy, tweeted, I'm trying to think of a good bill title that could win back some New York and New Jersey votes in the House.
Yes.
You're from New Jersey. I'm from New York. So I suggested to him there is only one title. It's called the I Got Your Middle Class Tax Cut Right Here Act of 2017.
That could be.
And if you are from New York and New Jersey, you will know exactly what I'm saying. And if you are not, I put a little handy animated GIF there to show you. I'll just tweet it over to you there so
Everybody
you can
knows
click
that's
on
not
it and
the
see
way
what I'm
it's
talking about here.
pronounced. Okay.
Look at the video, and you'll know why that should be the proper name.
Okay. He's got
Right? Because that's what that statement means. I got your middle class tax cut right here is accompanied by a hand over your crotch saying, yeah, go ahead, right here.
All right. Everybody gets it now. There's crotches all over this country.
Crotchety people. So, and I'm going to finish with a really fascinating thought piece here.
All right.
About a fight between conservatives.
Oh. All right.
Right.
Are they any crotches involved in this one?
They're all crotchety.
All right.
So Jennifer Rubin has been an anti-never-Trumper for a long time, but actually is starting to say some of the stuff that the GOP is trying to do is wrong. It's stupid. It's not a good idea. And she's changed her views on some things over the years.
Yes.
This really annoyed Charles C.W. Cook over at National Review, who basically accused Jennifer Rubin of being so anti-Trump that anything Trump says, she's the exact opposite without any thought. And that you have to be consistent and take his views day by day. You got to be Hugh Hewitt and Charles C.W. Cook, who say, I don't like Trump, but on this I like judges, and on this I like the tax policy, and that's the only reasonable way for a conservative to be. And David Frum takes a grander look at all of this and has an article here, which is the think piece, called Conservatism Can't Survive Donald Trump Intact. The conservative intellectual world is whipsawed between its distaste for Trump and its fear of its own audience. The conservative base has become ever more committed to President Trump and ever less tolerant of any deviation. Those conservative talkers most susceptible to market pressure, radio and TV hosts, have made the most spectacular conversions and submissions. Mark Levin, Tucker Carlson, I would add Hugh Hewitt, with reason. The same day that Cook launched himself into Jennifer Rubin, another contributor to the National Review special issue, Eric Erickson, announced he had lost his Fox News contract. Erickson had precisely followed Cook's advice, conscientiously seeking opportunities to praise Trump where he could. That halfway support didn't suffice for his producers. Charles Cook arraigned Jennifer Rubin for being dragged to new political positions by her resistance to Trump. She's not alone. Bill Kristol quipped on Twitter, the GOP tax bill's bringing out my inner socialist. The sex scandals are bringing out my inner feminist. Donald Trump and Roy Moore are bringing out my inner liberal. What is happening? Good question, says David Frum, and here's the answer. What's happening is the revelation that politics is dynamic, that new facts call forth new responses. Cook touts these alterations and deviations from principle, but really, this is a game that can be played by anybody who has access to Google. For example, the same Cook who produced the sharply personal attack on Rubin in 2017 condemned back in 2014 partisan post-rationalization decorated with insecure, albeit amusing ad hominem attacks. Well, we all change our minds, apparently. So, and Benjamin Wittes, who, blogs over at Lawfare and covers a lot about the Russia-Trump-Comey stuff, says on the surface, this David Frum piece is a spirited defense of J. Rubin blogger, that's her Twitter handle, in response to Charles C.W. Cook's essay, but beneath the surface, it's one of the most thoughtful and searing accounts of what Trump is doing to conservatism I have ever read.
Okay.
And basically what it's doing is it's making conservatives choose whether they really believe in what they say. It's Bob Corker writ large and Susan Collins writ large. Do you really believe what you say, or are you just going to fold because the political pressure on you is too great and therefore you're just going to go along to get along?
I don't know. We will find out. I didn't read all the way through it, but I did see, for example, I could pull it out. If you need to get to work, I could certainly cover it. But I was fascinated.
I'm going to have to scoot off. But,
by the example.
Why don't you go ahead and do that? This is a fantastic piece. I think the whole piece is worth you dissecting.
I was very reluctant to read it for some reason. I'm getting tired of David Frum, but he is making good points. I have to get past that. It doesn't mean I have to adopt his positions on anything. I can simply say, oh, okay, nod. There we go.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, there's my summary for today as to where we're at, America.
Fantastic.
On December 20th, 2017. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Wallman. Take care. I'll be back tomorrow. He'll take you the rest of the way.
Yes.
John will come and join us and tell us what's going on in Congress. But it's a really good front piece, so good luck with it. Take care.
Okay. Thanks very much, Greg. Have a great day. One more day until the shortest one of the year, so enjoy it.
Right.
I don't know what that means. But we'll see you tomorrow. How about that? I know it means that much. Thanks for the start, and what a start. We're almost at the halfway point already. I was reluctant. I don't know what it was. Just maybe it was the time of day. I was just like, you know what? I can't read David Frum. But I did see at least one pretty good example, a pretty solid example of okay, well, what do I make of this here? He's clearly making a great point. The things that Jennifer Rubin is saying aren't consistent with where she's been, and the only difference is Donald Trump. But maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something else to it. It may be because, after all, at bottom, why, for instance, am I reluctant to read David Frum? And the answer is every once in a while I remember that even though it appears on the surface that we're agreeing on a lot of things, either about the vulgarity of Donald Trump or occasionally the insanity of our gun policy, I am reminded, well, you know, he also was a major league salesman of a ridiculous, foolish, deadly war that poisoned the international environment forever by selling this axis of evil idea and convincing us all that launching this idiotic war was a great idea. Okay, so do we put it past? Do we put it in the past? Do we forgive? Does it need to be forgiven? I don't know. Do I have any power to do that? Probably not. Maybe the other formulation, instead of forgive and forget, as Greg formulates things, sometimes forgive and remember, somewhere around that, space. Maybe there's some room for it. I don't know. But at any rate, he did make a great point, at least in one of these more specific examples, which I imagine must be up near the top of the piece, because I know I didn't make it very far into it. Yes, and as a matter of fact, I can see it already. I'll read you his lead again, and then this example. On Monday morning, I think Greg covered most of this, the conservative media world woke up to a savagely personal attack in National Review. No surprise there. On Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin, the outburst might seem a textbook case of the narcissism of petty differences within the conservative world. Both the author of the denunciation, Charles C.W. Cook, not a good guy, don't really take much interest in what he does or what he says, and its target, Rubin, are right-leaning skeptics, both of them, of Donald Trump. What on earth could they be arguing about, and does it matter? He thinks it does a lot. Here's the specific example, right? I'll have to jump down just a little bit. Where did this go? I thought this was up top somewhere, and we're up against the break. Here we are. Yes. Thus, in the past, Rubin praised Marco Rubio and Mitt Romney, to no one's surprise. We know that happened, but specifically praised them when they pledged to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. When President Trump pledged to do it, she was unmoved, where once she followed the generic conservative line on taxes and guns, she now criticizes Trump for following that same line. That's actually quite an interesting point there. And it's one we've made quite often. Trump's really not that different from Republican orthodoxy, and we shouldn't forget that. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. During the break, I received another message, or responded to another message, from Kate Sherrill, who's got plenty to share with us, and perhaps all of your suggestions could be a nice bridge to welcoming Joan McCarter back to the air to help explain exactly what did happen with the tax bill yesterday, so we can get Greg back up to speed. I don't know whether he's finally read the explanation or was just trying to help us segue or what, but time out for this observation. Kate sends me a tweet from Jeff Asher. Let's see, who is Jeff Asher? Jeff Asher tweets as Crime Analytics, which gives you some pretty good hint at what he's up to. The tweet she pulls out of this tweet thread on year-end statistics on crime. And that's always an interesting investigation, right? So let's see. But this particular one is number 3 in the tweet storm here. Should probably surprise a lot of you. Las Vegas, the city, reported a drop of 28 murders in their murder rate because the city is not counting the 58 killed in the October mass shooting. So Las Vegas is actually reporting a drop in the number of murders committed in the city, despite the fact that I assume they probably hit a record high. It was this anomaly, though, and so they're not counting it. And I gotta say, I understand the inclination. Well, that's not fair. Well, it's what we're looking for fairness in mass shootings all of a sudden now. It happened. And it happened in your city, and it probably couldn't have happened in a great deal of other cities. It just, your city sets up pretty well for these things. One, of course, a huge number of giant hotels. A lot of them would be overlooking outdoor venue spaces like you had for this music festival. It's what the city's built for. Mass entertainment events. And the pure anonymity of moving into any one of these gigantic hotels. They all have thousands of rooms, so much activity and so much travel activity and so much convention and exhibitor type activity that you can move a dozen makeshift machine guns into your room without anybody even batting an eye at how much luggage you have. And, look, that's just the reality of your city. But to not count it, that's not going, I'll tell you what, that's not going to feel real good to the families of people killed there or injured, or just people who felt the impact at all of this event, to say, yeah, well, we're not counting it because, it's an anomaly. It's a once in a lifetime sort of thing. You can't get away with just not counting that, can you? I mean, I guess you can. Rules, schmools, right? Nothing matters, YOLO, et cetera, but I don't know. I just thought I'd bring that one to your attention. There's nothing we need to change. Nobody need to call to protest. Just at this point, we just give a giant wow to this and say, I don't know, man. I can't, I don't know what to make of this. Let's see. Greg has sent me a Tom Nichols, or Radio Free Tom. Oh boy, it's a thread, and you can show this thread now. We'll click on the show this thread button and see what's up. I guess reacting to this David Frum piece that we were just reading about. I would add, he says, just one more note, at least for me personally, on the issue of never Trump people changing their positions. I think for some of us, he continues, it's not that we changed our position, it's that we don't want this administration trying to do important and complicated things it doesn't understand. Now that's something that could help clear things up for me. For example, I don't know whether physically moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem is a good idea. I know that it will take skill and focus, and so I'd rather it not be done by the administration that lacks skill and focus. I'll accept this. This is a good point. Likewise, tax reform is as dear to my heart as any other conservative, but not this way, and certainly not led by a family who stands to gain from it. Does that make me against it? I guess so, for now. So yeah, POTUS critics are turning away from things we once wanted because they don't trust this White House to do them and not screw them up and lose them forever and make things worse than doing nothing. I gotcha. Jennifer Rubin and others can speak for themselves, and Charles Cook has every right to call out fellow cons for being inconsistent. That's healthy, but as Frum said, not healthy to start each day as if we have no memory of the previous day. I think that is a pretty good point. That does help explain things. Thanks, Greg. That clarifies for me what's one explanation of what's going on here, because it is kind of weird. Why would you be for moving the U.S. Embassy to Israel? And my initial thought was that perhaps it had something to do with the dog catching the car, being in favor of saying you're going to move the U.S. Embassy to Israel is like a great way of doing posturing for the Christian right, or for, I guess, those who support Israel from other standpoints, whatever it may be. But you never think it's going to happen because it's either a genuine impossibility, or there's never really going to be an administration that you're going to trust to have the skill to do this sort of thing. Maybe she would have trusted Mitt Romney or Marco Rubio to do it. I don't know why, but she's a Republican, so I guess it's entirely possible. But it's also entirely possible that while on the one hand you might trust some people to do it, it may also be that, look, I can advocate for this and make the base happy and know that it's never going to happen. I'm never going to have to live with the reckoning that comes from it, and that could be all that it is. But I guess giving her the benefit of the doubt, as Radio Free Tom seems willing to do, you can come up with a better explanation, and I guess it's as good an explanation as any. And speaking of good explanations, Joan McCarter is here. Good morning, Joan. How you doing? How's your voice today?
Good morning, Kagro.
All right, a lot better.
A little bleary.
Yeah.
It's a long night with the Senate.
Right.
A long day.
Yeah, and another one to come. We have yet to get to the subject of the fact that they screwed things up so badly that they're going to have another vote. I don't think the vote, no one expects the vote to go any different, obviously, but
No,
It's
not at
just
this
funny. It's just point and laugh material at this point, because what else are you going to take away from this? That even when they're just, compiling their own wish lists and passing them in the dead of night with no inspection whatsoever, they still can't get it right. And they fight with one another, I guess, about what the wish list should say or what letters should be used to spell it out. And when you're talking about a bicameral legislature passing the same bill, every T and I and comma and semicolon, etc., counts, or even something as simple as the title of the bill counts.
Well, when it's a budget resolution, when it's passing under the special rules created to leave the minority out of the process.
Yes, that too.
There are special rules. There are things that you need to do to comply with what may be arcane parliamentarian rules, but they still exist.
Right. Well, they made two very different kind of fundamental mistakes.
It's a reflection of just how insane this process has been and how ridiculously uncongressional they did this whole thing outside of regular order. That when it came down to it, the House passed a bill that couldn't go onto the Senate floor because, in part, of its title.
Yeah, that's a pretty large mistake. So, tell me about the title issue, though. I mean, that I did not expect them to get that wrong.
The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Yes,
that's what they wanted to call it.
Right.
But this is a budget reconciliation bill.
Mm-hmm.
It can't say anything about jobs. It can only reflect revenue.
I see. Even in the title, I mean, that does seem a little bit stringent. Like, I don't see why you couldn't call it the Whatever You Want Act.
Well, Democrats could have let it go.
Yeah.
They could have said, whatever. But
now, why do that, right?
Why?
Yeah.
Hey, why
No
not
sense
use this
in doing
opportunity to point out that they screwed this up?
Okay. And then, of course, I think a little bit more substantive and a little easier to understand. There were provisions in the conference report, added in conference, that people have been asking me over the last couple of days, when are people going to look at the conference report and see whether it's Byrd rule compliant? And so in the 10 minutes that we have in between getting the draft and the vote, that's when. And that's when they looked at it and apparently found, at least two provisions that
two other
didn't
provisions
work.
that were a problem. One was a Ted Cruz thing, allowing families that homeschool their children to use their tax-advantaged 529 savings accounts to pay for homeschooling their kids.
Now, 529 is 529s. Do you know anything about the provision itself? I thought that was for college savings.
It is for college savings.
But
yes.
So for non-college, that's the whole point of this thing, is for saving for college. But if you want to use it for something that isn't college, but still involves your kids in education, that's okay. That's what he was trying to do.
Yeah. Well,
but only for certain kinds of things.
Homeschooling.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Like, so for instance, if you wanted to go to a trade school, no, that probably might not help. I don't know whether trade school is already qualified, but if you wanted to homeschool your kids because you believed that sending them elsewhere to be educated for any reason was a terrible idea, and there are people who believe that, then if you're Christian enough, we'll also give you some money. I don't know exactly how he wrote it, but clearly
it was
a mistake.
It was, it was a thing for far-right Christians who homeschool.
They want more money.
Yeah. They want money, so they could set up, in his mind, a 529 savings account for their unborn child.
Yeah.
And then at some point in the future, use those savings to teach that kid at home. I don't know whether it was to buy textbooks or fun field trips, or I don't know, but yes, 529 savings accounts for college education do actually have to go to qualified colleges.
All right. Well, you can start your own college at home.
The third thing that was a problem for the parliamentarian it's sort of similar. It was for a tiny private religious school in Kentucky.
They're doing a lot for these one-off provisions for one school. This is the second time
for
around.
One school, and I can't remember the name of this one. It was in Kentucky, tiny school, like less than 500 students or something.
Right. I did see this one. No one
and this one school would not have to pay a new excise tax on its endowment.
Right. And now they had done this earlier for Hillsdale College, which is also kind of tiny and small, but super conservative. It's not that tiny, but I guess I assume one of the Kentucky senators figured they'd do this a favor for this other tiny Kentucky school. And that got to be a problem.
And maybe nobody would notice because, like you said, there would be 10 minutes between the conference report and the vote.
Right. But somebody did catch them. I saw that. And they never, of course, have the guts to say, from now on, this college doesn't have to pay taxes on its endowment. They come up with some cockamamie formula that is supposed to make it look like, anybody who qualifies under these standards would get this savings. But there turns out to be only one in the whole country that it works for. And, oh, my God, it happens to be in the state that the Senate Majority Leader represents. Wow. I guess that was an accident. Yeah. Right. I missed that. I wonder if I'm scrolling back to see. I know I retweeted somebody's stuff about this yesterday, and I think somebody, nailed the name of the college. But even people who follow it doesn't matter. Even if you follow the college basketball brackets in March, you're still not going to know who these people are and what their mascot is. Right. Division 56 school, apparently. I had no idea it went down that low. Okay. But, that was a pretty weird one. And they screwed it up good. And because the conference report is what they were voting on yesterday, the House passed it, no problem, because they don't care about the bird rule. And on its way through the House and making its way to the Senate, they discovered, there's some stuff in here that isn't going to pass muster. And that means now that the House is done, the Senate could attempt to pass the same thing, but to no avail, because these provisions, when you have a non-bird compliant piece on a point of order, can be stripped from the bill, and then you don't have identical text anymore.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So the
Senate
now the
House
did strip
it looks like it's going to be around 12 Eastern time today, around noon.
All right.
The House will bring it back. I Googled. It is Berea College in Berea, Kentucky.
That does sound. That sounds small. Are they affiliated with the La Brea Tar Pits of Los Angeles, or no?
I don't think so.
Okay, too bad. Well, it would make a great metaphor if it did, but apparently not. That's a very small place, and I think the provision was you had to have fewer than 500 tuition-paying students.
Right.
Which is also a weird thing, and probably a tip that's weird. They probably have more than 500 students, but for some reason, many of them don't pay tuition. I wonder where that would be.
It apparently does not charge tuition.
That must be it. So it's free college. Everybody loves it, I guess.
Okay. I mean, you probably have to pray a lot or something. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, probably. I was wrong.
Oh?
It enrolls about 1,600 students. I was getting the 500 thing from
the number of paying.
Number of paying students.
So this is a college full of deadbeats, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, here's the logo. It has a little motto, I guess, here. It's written in a circle, and part of it is upside down. So hold on a second. God has made of one blood all peoples of the earth. I imagine they probably borrowed that from a Bible or something somewhere. I'm not familiar with that one, but that gives you an idea of where they're coming from. Yeah, you're right. 1,600 plus students.
Yeah, it is an educational institution still firmly rooted in its historic purpose to promote the cause of Christ.
Well, that's nice.
And it aims to help its staff and students work toward both personal goals and a vision of a world shaped by Christian values.
Well.
It's got an endowment of $1 billion.
Yeah. I see that now on the Wikipedia page. They did not need any help. So 1,600 students, $1 billion endowment, and looking for a break. Interesting. By the way, founded by the other Cassius Clay, not Muhammad Ali, who's no longer Cassius Clay, but Cassius Marcellus Clay, who I don't know who the hell that is. He's as it turns out, the Lion of Whitehall. I'm looking at his Wikipedia. Who is this guy? A Kentucky planter, politician, and emancipationist who worked for the abolition of slavery. So there's going to be some people who are angry about that one. We're giving tax breaks to abolitionists. I hate those guys. They really. So I don't know. That'll disappoint some of them. But wow, that's very interesting, though. To have I wonder what the real deal is there. 1,600 students, fewer than 500 of whom pay tuition. I don't know whether none of them do, but if you pray enough, you get it for free, or.
Well, you work 10 to 15 hours per week.
I see. Well,
it's a work college.
Oh, I get it. I mean, you're supposed to work on your studies, but okay, you work there instead.
Yeah.
And then, well, all right.
And
that's very intriguing.
The college's president told the Lexington Herald leader last month that the school was working with Barr, McConnell, and Rand Paul
there you go.
to exclude the school from the tax. So, yeah, that was definitely a Mitch McConnell thing.
Did they give any excuse for, like, why should we be exempted from it? Like, we're small and it hurts, or we do something special?
Because we use the entirety of our endowment to educate these kids.
Oh. Well,
we could not otherwise afford to attend college.
I see. I mean, that's actually probably pretty noble and all. I don't know if I would count what they do necessarily as educating them right off the bat. I'd have to learn a little bit more about this college. But,
yes.
I mean, otherwise it's not a bad idea. But why would it benefit just this one college? I'm not really sure. There are not a lot, but there's a couple of colleges out there that have that very interesting model of, we're going to take endowment money from wealthy donors and use it to, every college is supposed to do at least some of this, but there are some places that really, as a policy, just, if you can get in and meet our very stringent standards, we won't charge you any tuition. It does happen.
It does happen.
All right. Well, I'm curious about this. Yeah. Well, yes. Right. There are some places that do it with their entire enrollment, very few and far between. But of course, every college or university does some scholarship. Or not. I suppose someone will prove me wrong. There's a tiny college in Louisiana somewhere or something that doesn't. But that's it's not a bad thought. It's just strange that you couldn't write a more broadly applicable provision, and odd that the two Kentucky senators had something to do with it, and it worked out that only one college actually qualifies, and it's in my state.
Well, there was a second one, the College of the Ozarks, that might have also fallen into that, but it's it's a pretty BS kind of thing that the parliamentarian just said no.
Okay. Well,
the only thing really interesting about it having to go back is that it gives House Appropriations Committee Chairman Frelinghuysen, how do you say that?
Frelinghuysen,
another opportunity to vote against his leadership.
Yes,
on this bill.
He's excited about that. It works in New Jersey.
Yep. It puts him in kind of a difficult position with his leadership, though, being the appropriations chairman.
Yes, that's something that could go away very easily, I guess, if they get
Yes, it
enough.
could, because the last time he voted against it, which was the first time it went through, Ryan and team discussed kicking him off, taking his chairmanship away.
Well, they'll soon have a break during which they can ponder that, and that could happen. Really, honestly, if you're that much in disagreement with your leadership, it's probably a pretty uncomfortable place to be. But exercising power is fun, so he'll be sad.
He'll be sad.
Yeah. By the way, I was thinking in all this college discussion, like of Cooper Union College, or are they a university? I can't recall. But they're in New York, and they were lately, they they screwed themselves up quite a bit, and they ended up ending their tradition of being tuition free in the last couple of years because they put themselves in an economic bind. They probably could have used some help to continue to offer high quality tuition free education, but they're in New York City and therefore they suck. The College of the Ozarks and Berea College in Kentucky will take care of all your tuition free needs. Thank you very much. Just pray and whip yourself for 15 hours a day or whatever it is they have the kids do. I'm sure it's productive and wonderful.
I'm sure.
Yes, I'll say that now. But I don't know. I know nothing about Berea College. Good luck getting into the basketball tournament, though. That will pay more attention to you.
I don't know if they do sports there.
Oh,
but it's Kentucky, so.
Oh, in America, then that's not even a college.
Right.
That's the way in focus.
What's McConnell think he's doing?
Oh my God. That could get him in trouble in Kentucky. But I don't know. He's always been kind of a weird, anomalous Kentucky politician. And they continue to call their biggest political gathering of the year Fancy Farm and get away with it. So
yeah,
I can't explain Kentucky
that one at all.
Woo.
So
yes,
taking care of this around noon today, apparently, they will move on to trying to figure out how to keep the government running.
That's an idea.
They had their whole big plan as of, I don't know, like 10 o'clock yesterday evening when it all fell apart. They were going to do a year-long defense spending in this keeping the government open continuing resolution.
Okay.
What they were going to do is provide an entire year of defense spending and then do just until January 19th with everything else.
Okay.
So that they could come back again in January and have these fights all over again about how much they're funding what.
They do like these fights.
But for some reason, that entirely fell apart.
I wonder, was it a disagreement about how to do it, or was it a drafting error, or we just don't know?
A disagreement, and I'm not, and I don't know why that ended up being the thing that got cut. But right now, apparently, it's looking like perhaps there will be a clean funding bill until January 19th for the whole government.
Okay.
I think, again, because if they want to get the $81 billion disaster aid through, they're going to have to get some Democrats, and Democrats were not going to be agreeing to only funding the Pentagon and not having a fight over a dollar for dollar increase in domestic spending for every dollar increased in defense spending. That was sort of what Democrats were insisting upon. And on top of this, we need the $81 billion in disaster aid to Texas and Florida, for one, where, gosh, there are quite a few Republican members of Congress.
Yeah.
And, of course, the Tea Party types, the Freedom Caucus maniacs, saying, no, we don't really think that there should be disaster aid included in this shutdown bill. So they're going to try now to separate out the disaster relief, it looks like, for a separate vote where Democrats will help pass that too.
Okay.
The problem that you've got there is that they're leading children's health insurance program up in the air. We don't know yet whether it's going to be in the funding bill. And Democrats are going to be pretty insistent that that happens. We've already got programs shutting down.
Yes, that's finally
You have Alabama and Connecticut saying we are not taking any more enrollments, and as of January 31st, sorry, you're out of the program. So this is kind of a problem.
Very clearly so. So, yeah, all right. Well, we'll see what they work this out.
At this point, know the status of negotiations on the DREAM Act on DACA kids. While I was watching the Senate last night, I saw both Pelosi and Schumer are caving and they're not insisting on that. But at the same time, there were reports that Kelly is meeting in the White House with leading senators and House members to figure out a compromise. So I don't know where DACA fits into this anymore. We'll find that out. I'm sure Gabe will be on top of that for the blog today. There's also a Section 702 spying powers under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Those are expiring.
Oh, good.
And
yeah.
It
won't obviously actually happen, but okay, so that's something else they got to cram in here as well?
That has to happen before the 22nd, which is Friday.
Yeah.
Well.
Is that where our current funding runs out? Is it 22nd at the moment?
22nd.
Or are we? Okay, so they didn't even do themselves the favor of giving them to the 31st, but I lost track of that somewhere along the way. All right, well, we'll take a short break, gather our thoughts, and move on from there. There's a lot to cover, a lot to contemplate, and they have like 2 days to do it. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. We're here with Joan McCarter, filling us in on the 15 things that need doing before Friday in Congress, each of which normally takes a week and a half to get done properly, but for which we have 2 days.
We don't do properly anymore in our government.
And they'll probably want to be out early and get on their flights. I'm surprised that they'll even be here or even contemplate being here on Friday. Normally they want to leave on Thursday mid-afternoon.
Well, the House wants to leave on Thursday. This is what they're going to try to do, is get all of their voting done tomorrow, dump it on the Senate, and skip town. That's
they've been the House under both parties has been trying to do this for about 150 years to the Senate, and it has never worked. But okay, it's a good. Give it the old Berea College try, I think.
There you go. Which one of the big things, of course, that's still pending is that those Obamacare stabilization bills. Yeah. One of which, extending CSR payments, the cost sharing reduction payments to insurance companies, is moot pretty much at this point. Because most of the insurance companies figured out their premium rates for this year without it.
Okay.
And this is where we ended up having so many insurance plans that were essentially free for people. Because insurance companies could load all of the premium increases into their non-standard plans. The silver switcheroo, it was called by wonks like Charles Gaba.
Okay.
So anyway,
yes. I remember the issue.
The point is, insurance companies pretty much figured out a way around CSRs, and if this ends up showing up for them, it's not necessary at this point, and could be confusing with contracts that they've made with states. So that is not at all helpful at this point, despite Susan Collins' insistence upon it happening. The other thing is a reinsurance program. The insurance for insurance companies who end up taking on a higher risk pool, people who cost more. So the reinsurance program has some value. We can probably cobble something together without it. But anyway, this is what Susan Collins was insisting upon, among a few other things, for her vote on the tax bill.
Okay.
And all along, the House has been saying, nope, not going to do it.
Yeah.
We have our chance now to get Obamacare, which Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn were both crowing about last night, having accomplished. We're not going to do anything to fix it.
Okay.
And yet Susan Collins persisted in
see, there you go.
her fiction.
You can persist in dumb things too.
Yes, you can. And the House still says, nope, not going to do it. Not going to do it. So, it's probably not going to happen. Although this is where the ping-ponging back and forth of the bill between the House and the Senate is problematic. Originally, Senate was going to pass theirs. They were going to have the reinsurance and the CSR payments in it, send it to the House. House was going to say absolutely no way. send it back to the Senate, dump it on them with stuff that they would want to jam Democrats in the Senate on. This is not a bill that can pass with 51 votes. It has to have 60. So Democrats in the Senate have to be on it.
Okay. Well,
so here's where we're at.
Yes.
We don't know.
And neither do they.
We have unified government.
Yes.
We have a Republican House, Republican Senate, Republican White House, and we still might end up with a shutdown government because Republicans don't know how to do this. They don't know how to do it without taking political hostages.
Yeah. Well, that's their favorite practice. So that's the only thing that they have figured out how to do in all the time that they've been in the majority.
And they persist in taking hostages against each other.
Yes, that too. Well, when you get a trick that works.
I guess
you just keep doing it. Wow. All right. That's an awful lot of very bad work to do in a short amount of time. So only some of which will actually get done, I assume. And they're probably only we'll keep the government running, and the rest of us, the rest of this work will probably just be held over, and then I don't know what they'll do with it exactly, but.
And where this leaves the 34 million people relying on the Children's Health Insurance Program and community health centers, we don't know. Hanging.
Yes, right.
In utter limbo. We've got no indication that they want to do this. Because as Orrin Hatch so famously said, we can't afford it anymore.
Yeah, right. Gee,
well, they're passing the $1.6 trillion tax cut.
Yes. So, yeah, it's as obvious as can be, all the money that, if you believe in the need to pay for anything in particular, and I guess that's up in the air at this point, both Republicans and Democrats asking that question. But, yeah, the idea that in the traditional sense, you need to have money to pay for things. If you're sending it all out the window to millionaires and people who don't need it, or companies that are saying we don't need it either, but thanks for thinking of us, and I guess if you give it to us, we'll give it away to our shareholders rather than create any jobs with it. And that seems to be fine with Republicans, and that's what they'll do.
It's pretty remarkable just how blatant they've been in all of this. Paying lip service to the idea of economic growth. And in fact, Paul Ryan this morning, pushed by Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show, which, by the way, is a much more pleasant thing to watch when Matt Lauer isn't there.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Especially since we now know what we know about him. Although, even when we didn't know, he was kind of grating.
He was awful.
Yeah.
He was horrible.
All right. I think that's fair to say.
But pressed by Savannah Guthrie on what was going to happen now, did he really believe that there would be $1.6 trillion worth of economic growth? Paul Ryan says nobody knows the answer to that question. It's in the future.
You would want to know that.
And what he immediately did then was pivot to spending cuts.
Oh, yes.
Because, we've all known all along that, this huge gift to the donor class is a big deal. It's really important. But we've also known that because they've told us over and over again, this is going to set us up for the manufactured deficit crisis under which they can demand spending cuts.
Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid, and if they can figure out any way to do it, Social Security.
Yeah. They'll be looking for that. And so far it's survived most of the heat. But, yeah, I imagine any way they can open that door. That's the big prize.
That's the big prize, and that's been in their sights from the very beginning. They've admitted it. That and getting Obamacare, which they're crowing over, of course, because really, what's more Republican than giving everything away to the donor class and taking health care away from everybody else?
At this point, nothing. There's a lot that used to be hard to believe that Republicans would be interested in doing it, but now it's, I think, assumed that it's exactly what they're after.
Yeah. And they're not even trying to cover it up anymore.
No.
Just the audaciousness of this bill is pretty shocking. But I guess if you've got Donald Trump as your standard bearer, then you can figure you can get away with anything.
I suppose that's true. He's sort of like the ultimate shiny object in the sense that it's not the attractive to the eye shiny object, but the dumpster fire also shines very brightly as well. And I guess you can just point to that and say, well, you focus on that train wreck, and the bigger a loudmouth he is about, the things he's loud about, and the dumber the better. I guess they figure they can get away with doing these things. I don't know. There's no predicting where they'll go anymore, because I think up until at least a couple of weeks ago, most people probably would have been shocked to find out for real that it's the Republican Party whose tax and budget bill, and not only. I mean, I don't think they would be surprised about cutting taxes for the rich necessarily, but the part about giving themselves permission to add, if they're lucky and the numbers work out, $1.5 trillion to the debt.
Yeah.
Clearly, they're not going to vote for that. Oh, well, actually, they probably would do that. And even though it runs counter to everything that they've told you about what they stand for as a party for the last 30 years, they're going to do it and do it happily. And I guess, it took some time for us to get used to the idea, the mainstream of America, not the non-political junkies, to figure out,
yes.
It's
been clear to most of us for a very, very, very long time that, they don't care about the deficit.
Right. I don't see how it gets any clearer than, say, Dick Cheney saying, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's never mattered, not when it comes to tax cuts for the rich or war.
I mean, how old is that statement? It's got to be like 10, 15 years old now. Imagine, right?
Yeah.
So, or getting close to it anyway. So they've been pretty out in the open with it. And I guess, well, all right, a lot of things have been shocking.
A lot of things have been shocking.
That's the idea.
Like, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
Yes. I see, by the way, by way of breaking news, I see that I guess the vote in the House Democratic Caucus on leadership of the Judiciary Committee in the absence of John Conyers for the first time in forever, it goes to Jerry Nadler will win the chairmanship. He was in a contest against Zoe Lofgren for that chair. And I will tell you this. I put aside an article about it. We won't get to it today. Maybe we'll discuss it a little bit tomorrow. But it's the way you would hope such a leadership race would go. They were very cordial with one another and both said, look, the other one would make a fine chair. I think I would do the job differently and emphasize different things. And they put the question out there. And they voted, and Nadler comes away with it. Tomorrow we'll figure out whether or not this was entirely predictable based on leadership PAC funding or not. In the last year or so, Zoe Lofgren's actually been giving away more money than Nadler did, but I don't know whether that's whether that applies over the lifetime of their leadership PACs or not. And I'll bet it doesn't. But at any rate, I was not sure where I would go. I've always been impressed with Nadler. I like him a great deal in the way he approaches some of the core constitutional issues that have come up in our various protests against the way George W. Bush ran his administration, clearly the way Trump runs his administration. But on the other hand, I thought Lofgren made a good point, like, okay, that's not all we're doing, although it'll be a great deal of what a majority Democratic House would spend its time on, surely, investigating the Trump administration, but might not now be a good time to put a woman at the head of this committee. There never has been one, and there are suddenly tremendous and society-shaking legal and judicial issues surrounding sexual harassment, say, right here at home, in the Congress, and everywhere else in the economy, it might not be a bad idea to have somebody with a more inherent understanding of the issue at the helm.
It would probably have been helpful.
Yes. On the other hand, it could certainly be a subcommittee's work, and you can be, I think, fairly confident that Nadler would be very happy to accommodate that work if she were to lead it. But anyway, it was a good race in the terms of nobody jabbing each other in the eye about things. And that's nice. But okay, we'll see where this direction goes. I guess for those of you who wanted or who were concerned that the emphasis needed to perhaps be the investigation of the Trump administration or even his impeachment, Nadler's win is maybe a thumb on the scale in that direction, though Zolofgren is no slouch when it comes to that stuff either.
No.
She's got actually got experience.
But at this point, Nadler might be a better choice for going for the jugular.
Yeah, maybe. She's been we'll see. She's a little more accommodating when it comes, and sometimes that's necessary, but maybe not here. All right. Well, just thought I'd intervene with that note. Anything else that we might
just something that popped up in my head when we were talking about just how blatant and unbelievable Republicans have been. Mm-hmm. Ivanka went on Fox and Friends and touting the impact of tax reform said small businesses will have the lowest taxes since 1931.
Yes, that's right. Maybe. I don't know whether that's actually right or not, but she did say it. I saw somebody, in case you were wondering about that, somebody tweeted the right comment to it. Yes, that well-known great year for business, 1931. That was so huge, and whereas everybody was working their side hustles at home and running these small businesses.
You also saw John Cornyn's tweet, didn't you?
Yes. And the commentary on it. They have a very odd definition of of who will benefit. And usually, you put out something and say, well, a typical family of four saves $4,000 in taxes.
And the typical family of four with two parents who earn wages of $60,000 combined have pass-through income of $100,000 because of their side businesses. So that's every family I know.
I was astonished by it just because I couldn't believe that they didn't see how ridiculous that looked. I was reading that, and there were a couple other very interesting tweets about the same subject at home, discussing it and saying, not only is it convoluted sounding, but I don't even really know what it means to have $60,000 in wage income. I understand that part. But in order to get to the savings, he was trying to concoct a tax return that would result in, he was very proud to say, a 24% reduction in taxes paid. But in order to get to it, you had to have $100,000 a year in taxable income, but $60,000 of it had to be from wages, $25,000 of it from non-corporate business. I do not know what that is. And $15,000 in business income. That's the same family here. $60,000 in wages, $25,000 from a non-corporate business, and $15,000 in business income. Do you know what the difference between the 25 and the 15 is? How to define that?
Me?
Yeah, I mean,
no.
Does anybody? I don't know.
Is it two businesses that they have?
I got no idea. $15,000 in business income.
That they're double counting? Is it
a non-corporate business? Like, does that mean doing business as some company name, but I'm a sole proprietorship and I haven't incorporated? I don't know, and I don't know anybody who does know, and I don't know anybody who has this situation.
Well, if there are any of these people out there,
yes, tweet me.
They're getting a 24% reduction in their taxes.
Yeah.
Two of the families to whom this might apply?
I don't know. Chris Hayes was talking about it too, and just, I don't know whether he was spoofing it or whether he was really trying to describe what would it take to get to this.
Well, it was interesting to see people actually trying to figure out how this scenario could possibly work in the real world.
Yeah.
We all went to, wait a minute.
It's bizarre. And Chris Hayes' send up of it, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is accurate. The typical American household, 2 parents, 2 kids, 7 limited liability partnerships, a dozen individual real estate LLCs, several investment vehicles throwing off streams of passive income. You get the idea. Your everyday
You get
family.
the idea. You get the idea. By the way,
Wow. Yeah.
the median income in Texas, where John Cornyn is from, is $55,000 for families.
Okay. So, but if you happen to make $5,000 more than that from your wages, and B, make another $40,000 on the side, some of it incorporated, some of it not. Then
you're getting your tax cut.
Good for you. You made it. I saw a lot of interest in that. Jamel Bowie also sent around. He said it reminded him of what he said was a classic Wall Street Journal image on typical family incomes. I guess the last time Republicans were reforming our taxes, between 2012 and 2013, they were comparing how typical families would do between the taxes they paid in 2012 and what they would now pay in 2013. Right off the bat, you get the idea. They're talking about single parent, 2 children, right? Income of, if you're a single parent with 2 kids and an income of $260,000 annually, why, this is what will happen to you.
Yes.
This is the Wall Street Journal's idea.
I love that graphic.
I love that one. That was great. The other family in trouble, just keeping their heads above water, married couple, 4 children, income $650,000.
Yes, there was no scenario in which somebody made less than $200,000 in that, was there?
No, well, there was one. The retired couple making $180,000. So missing by a mere $20,000. But the retired folks with their $180,000 annual income.
They probably had real estate LLCs.
Yes, probably so. That's the only way I can imagine that they'd get to that.
I'm feeling like we all should have real estate LLCs.
I think it's possible that and by the way,
I mean, it's the thing for members of the Senate.
Yeah.
They're making themselves millionaires, and 14 of them are getting really, really great tax breaks now.
Yeah, and I imagine people will be rearranging a lot. If you have enough money at stake and you have accountants and lawyers to help you with it, it's probably a relatively easy thing to do. I changed my Twitter name to David Waldman LLC some months ago in anticipation of this, but I have yet to make the real estate investment. Yeah,
you get on that. Clearly, it's the way to go.
I know, and I don't have much time to do it. But if Congress can address all this stuff before Friday, certainly I can incorporate by next Friday.
You're a lawyer, right?
Yeah, sure. I should be doing this right away. I did see Paul Krugman was outlining one immediately obvious tax dodge that he was saying you could do is, if you, whatever your income is from, if you are, like a doctor or a dentist, right? And if you have a partnership, you'll probably already have the LLC. But if you are a sole practitioner, he was describing real estate LLCs seem to be the most favored of all the small business breaks that they're giving. And he's just outlined something off the top of his head. If you buy the building where your practice is located and then make an LLC out of your practice, and then as landlord, charge your own LLC exorbitant rent. In other words, all the money you make as a doctor or a dentist, whatever that number is, that's going to be your rent for staying in the building that you own. Right. And then you pay all the money that you make as a doctor or a dentist, move it into the rent category, put it in your LLC's, in the bank account of the LLC that owns the building that's charging the rent. And then as sole proprietor of that LLC, pay yourself all that money. You now pay the 20% rate for real estate LLCs instead of the 39 or whatever percent that it would be if you were just getting paid as a dentist. That's all it takes.
Your income.
Move it around and you've cut your taxes in half. Pretty good. And I figure maybe that, you and I, you work at home, right? Maybe what you need to do is you transfer ownership of your home to a temp agency that you start, which has only one client and one worker that you rent to yourself. And you temporarily employ yourself as an employee, and doing the work of Daily Kos. And then maybe you'll be able to save on your taxes too. Although I don't know if you're do you make it to the 39% bracket? I don't know, but still.
No, I don't. Marcos is generous, but not that generous.
20% is probably lower than your current rate. So we'll see if we can't work this out and figure out a way for all of us to become LLCs. And
again, you're a lawyer. You get to work on this. Figure it out for us.
George Mason University School, now Antonin Scalia School of Law grad. I should be able to make this work instantly. This should be second nature to me. I'll be working on it when I figure it out. I'll distribute it in a memo, and we can all become it's one big collection of LLCs. We should change the front page to Daily Kos LLC as quickly as possible.
We might as well.
Yeah.
Can't beat them, join them. But we can beat them.
True.
This is the most unpopular, massive piece of legislation that a Congress has ever passed. It's hugely unpopular, and people are not going to see benefits from this by November of 2018. They're going to be confused by it. They're not going to see money coming back in their paychecks. They're not going to be happy. And if children's health isn't funded, if they start having to pay a lot more in premiums for their health insurance, there are a lot of things that are going to backfire on this. We can beat them.
I hope so. And we'll have some more allies in it come this time next year, or I guess a few months. We want to target a few months before this come next year. But okay.
Starting pretty much immediately.
Yes.
Oh, and by the way, net neutrality, we're fighting that too.
Yes, although, yes, as I understand it, we'll get a vote of some sort on that in Congress. Is that correct? Schumer's figured out a way.
Schumer in the Senate, and I'm blanking on who's shepherding in the House. Okay. They're going to force a CRA vote, a Congressional Review Act vote.
Right.
Which normally we hate.
Right. It's a favorite Republican tool, and they'll simply use it against them this time.
But in this case, what it would simply do is restore net neutrality, restore the open internet rules.
Roll back the rollback.
Roll back the rollback.
All right. Well, do you know when that might happen? Or I guess it has to happen within a certain number of days.
It's got to happen within 60 days.
Okay. So then, what if they just take a really, really long vacation and come back in February? Does that count? I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll look it up. But okay, yes, thanks for bringing that one to our attention. So I guess we'll have one more pass at it. If you're going to be around next Wednesday, we'll catch up with you on that and much more. You'll let me know what your schedule is like.
Well, it's my birthday, but I'll probably be here.
Well, we can move the date if you'd like to have the day off. Happy birthday.
I haven't had time to even think if I want the day off.
Okay. This
has been a rather busy few weeks.
I'll bet that's how hard she's working
Joan
for you,
World
everybody.
at the blog.
Okay. Well, happy birthday in advance in case you decide to take the day off. And,
Thank you.
If not, we'll welcome you here, and maybe we'll get some cake and whatever. It's a little early.
Maybe we can have some fun.
Yes, I would. I certainly hope we can. We do each time, but maybe we'll try and make it more special somehow. Noisemakers of some kind, I think.
There you go.
It's radio. It has to be. Okay, thanks very much, Joan. And
you are most welcome.
It's amazing what's going on, and good luck keeping your head above water for the next couple of days, and then I hope a brief rest for you after Friday.
I appreciate that. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, and we will hopefully speak a little bit next week. Thanks for coming in today. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer at the Daily Kos. Keep an eye on the front page today as the Congress finishes its work. And if you want to keep an ear on the radio, and I recommend that you do, we have, of course, Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here. Just keep it tuned to Netroots Radio, and I'll give you a sense of what you're going to catch on the next show. They have a tasty morsel for you of Fox News host Shep Smith and judicial analyst Andrew Napolitano nailing their own network for lying about the Russia probe. That ought to be worth listening for. Then on the rest of the menu, examining the FBI investigation into the mysterious $30 million missing from the Oklahoma Health Department. Trump's national security strategy makes for some sad reading by European governments, and China's flagship television network still has not registered as a foreign agent. Catch up with us, guys.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Also on the program, industrial polluters are using racketeering laws to silence environmental activists. How do you like that? And astronomers at the International Space Station successfully sequenced the genes of 3 unknown organisms and correctly identified them. So why won't they tell us what they were? Intriguing. Stay tuned and find out.